So this is not actually correct, and I just cut up a whole bunch of papayas for a late night snack. Well, I'm not going to eat all of these. Some are for other people in the morning, but I'm going to have this for a late night snack while we talk about why this is not actually quite correct. So Jesus was a rabbi. He abided by and taught by Jewish law, and Jewish law did mandate government redistribution of wealth for the poor, or at least pretty close equivalent to what would have been government for them. You see, the Jewish law required 3 tithes, and no, these weren't just religious, they were societal. This was civil law. We also have gleaning in the Old Testament. So let's talk about these 4 things. The first tithe is something called the Levitical tithe, which you've probably heard of. The classic 10% for the church is derived from this idea in the Old Testament of 10% for the Levites. Now, funny enough, that's not for the priests necessarily. It's for the Levites as the only tribe who don't have land. So there actually was an additional 10% that was taken from that was strictly for the priests. So, interesting. So in addition to the Levitical tithe, we next have the feast tithe for the Feast of Booths and Passover, and I'm blanking on the third one. But basically, Jews were supposed to set something aside, 10%, another 10%, that would be then used for these feasts. And it wouldn't only be used for themselves, it would be used for their household, and even for providing for enjoyment of the feast and celebration of the feast for the poor and for the stranger. Pretty cool. It's like mandated PTO for you and other people at your expense. And last of all, we have the poor tithe, which was gathered not every year, but every 3 years, and so thus evens out to about 3% year over year. And that was specifically for grain and stuff to be stored in the storehouse for the poor, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, refugee, all of that. Now, quick important thing to note here, the tithe was not gathered from everyone. It was not gathered from wages. It was not gathered from laborers because of that. It was only gathered from landowners. So yeah, that's wealth redistribution. And Jesus, as a teacher of the law, would have taught these things to other Jews. Now, gleaning is even further and more explicitly redistribution, because in gleaning, in the practice of gleaning, you had to leave the corner of your field as a landowner unharvested so that the poor and the widow and those in need, the stranger, can come and take some of your own harvest. So, hey, we know it's your field, we know it's your harvest, we know you planted it, but you don't get it all. That's redistribution, bro. So, did Jesus advocate for government reallocating wealth? Yeah, kind of. He advocated for civil laws that required reallocation of wealth. If you learned something, stick around. This is the kind of stuff I talk about.